everyone, and this is Collin Kelly.
And I'm Jackson Lanzing.
And we're here for Comics Online, kicking butt.
Back with Jackson and Collin. We are here today thanks to our friends at FanExpo Chicago setting up this interview. You know, they will have already been in Chicago by the time that this episode airs, but we're truly appreciative of our friends at FanExpo for facilitating. And thanks to our friends at IDW, I'm a couple weeks ahead with issues of Day of Blood. So we will be talking spoilers for parts 2, 3, and 4. Part two has already come out. Parts 3 and 4, by the time we see this, or release it, you'll be good. So,
and
guys,
it was so good to see all of you at FanExpo Chicago. I cannot believe that you guys bought every comic that we brought. It was incredible.
Yeah, wow, just incredible.
Thank you.
So that panel,
you guys really rocked.
Collin, I couldn't believe the A game you brought for the panel. It was amazing.
I really wanted to bring those I wanted to surprise Jackson with all of those details. And so, those were real tears.
It was a pretty incredible thing until the fist fight in the last 15 minutes. I wish we hadn't had a mano duel in front of all of the fans. While the Star Trek music played. That was maybe a misstep.
You didn't have to break my Lurpa like that.
And the nicest part with the shout out that I got on the panel from you guys, just being in the room, it was really nice. I wasn't expecting it. So I'm seriously excited to continue the conversation, and the fact that IDW was kind enough to let me get a sneak peek at what you guys have coming up with these issues. Man, those were two intense issues. I mean, really, the entirety of Day of Blood has really been impressive and intense, to say the least. But we'll start off with part 3. Sella's moment, in the spotlight, and the single page just action sequence of her dashing across the planet, like that was fantastic. I guess for you guys, as far as breaking part 3, what was your personal highlights, and I guess what stood out to you as it came together? Because obviously writing it versus seeing it come together on the page, can be different for creators, but what did you guys think as you were pulling this out?
I mean, obviously that Sella stuff is a real highlight. Like being able to lens in on these characters who haven't gotten a chance to, obviously they've been getting an amazing chance to kick ass in their respective books, but being able to bring them together and really see how these characters play off each other that's the real dream for us, right? That's the promise of this book, of the series, of this line, is that they can exist independently, but then slam together, and then we can really have them pop. And because it's comics, we can do things on such a scale that, the TV shows never could. So I'm going to ruminate more. I'm going to think about a specific moment that I love.
Yeah, I'm literally going to the script.
Okay, well then I'll gush for a minute. The Data lore interaction, following up from part 2, of Data essentially saying that even if I had my emotion chip on.
So little insight into the way that Day of Blood was done, because it was done differently than a lot of other events are done, or certainly maybe different than how Cold War was managed.
Yeah, it's very interesting to talk about this after talking about Cold War, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
Because Cold War was a process where we had one conversation where we kind of rough outlined everything, and then we all shared a paper outline back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and then we really just went onto our islands and wrote the book. And really there wasn't a ton of conversation between Tochi and Collin and I on Tochi's issues or on our issues. Most of that was just handled through Alana Smith, and editorial kept kept things going, and we put the book together like that. And then we all worked together on Alpha and Omega, and sort of split up the writing chores, 3 ways on all that. On Day of Blood, we all got together at the IDW offices, in person for several days, and acted like a writer's room. And so just Chris Cantwell and Collin and myself, and obviously Heather Antos and Vanessa Royale, and finally Jamie Rich, all got together and just talked about Star Trek for days. And we beat this event into shape, moment to moment to moment. I mean, we literally beat out the entire thing scene by scene. So we knew everything that was happening in this event before we ever went to script. So every beat that you see was pitched by somebody in the room and ended up on the board and then ended up getting sorted into the thing the way you might do for a TV show, rather than like a more traditional comics event. And this comes to some degree from Collin and I having worked in television. Obviously, Chris having worked in much more television than us, right? Showrunner of *Halt and Catch Fire* and you know, Paper Girls, and like lots of like really incredible television on Chris's radar. And so getting to share that space with him was just obviously an honor. Was a really lovely experience. But that beat specifically with lore was something Chris pitched early. Was we were talking about how you pivot lore, because we knew, let's just say we all have big plans for lore, and we knew that arc was going to kick off here. That like a big part of Day of Blood had to be completely changing lore's relationship with the line, not just with Star Trek Defiant, but with the entire Star Trek line. And so figuring out what could fit as a really interesting breaking point between these two guys, after seeing them get to work together so well in part 2 of Day of Blood, what could pivot them? And I remember we were saying, like, I think we were just sort of talking about the idea of like, oh, well, Data would tell Lore that he has to get deactivated by the time that this is done. Like, that's just like natural. And that would be a really nice way for Lore to start feeling under pressure again. And I think it was Chris that said, yeah, but let's turn that up, because you have the emotion chip thing at play. So couldn't the whole thing be like, turn on your emotion chip, because if I turn on my, and have Data be like, no, I'm not going to turn on my emotion chip, because if I do, I am likely to kill you. And we all just kind of sat in the room on that beat, and we were just like, yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, that's Data in a nutshell. He's saying something very brutal and not really realizing that he's saying something brutal, because what he's saying is just truth. It's just evident truth. And without the emotion chip, that evident truth is just facts for him. He's not trying to be hurtful, but ultimately it's such a hurtful beat for Lore. So I think that then it got laced into our issue, and I was like, we get to take credit for it, but it's not our beat. Like we all came up with that, but Chris, like, that line is Chris, and is one of the great things about working with Chris Cantwell is he's really, really, really good at finding those places to like uncomfortably twist the knife.
So, like, obviously this issue actually has two of my favorite beats. But there is one that I've been wanting to write since I first started watching Voyager. Voyager is one of my favorite shows, and mostly it is for the relationship between Tom and B'Elanna. I think that's one of the best relationships in all of Star Trek. And so getting to write the scene where they get to come together. I love a strong, contentious woman. Meet my wife. She is B'Elanna Torres to a nutshell. And I think it's incredible when you can see two people just go hammer and tongs at each other and then still find the truth in their relationship and that affection, right? Like, it's the thing, and we say it right in the book, it's about the beating of two Klingon hearts, right? When you find someone who just is on your wavelength, who you can argue with, who you can disagree with, but through that friction, you're able to make something incredibly special. I think that's the real magic trick, and I think that's the magic trick of their relationship. So getting to kind of dive into that was just like, you know, is it the most dramatic of beats in the entire series? No. But is it one of the most authentic? I really think so, and I absolutely love the two of them.
As for my favorite beat in the book, I do want to just I want to shout out so we have this character on Flagship on Star Trek called Lieutenant Dashini. And Dashini wasn't part of our initial outline. She was not part of any of our initial storytelling premises. She was not in our cast list when we started. Dashini was drawn by Ramon Rosanas, the core artist on Star Trek, in the very first issue on the bridge, clearly standing at the ops station, and was just the ops bridge officer. And we were like, shoot, we don't really have an ops officer. So I guess it's this character. And we did a bunch of research and figured out which she clearly had some like Native American ancestry, and she had a Native American headdress sort of piece. And we were like, okay, well, how do we let's make sure that's super authentic. So we like really went into it and asked some people and did some research and found a culture and found some names and found some stuff that really fit and created this character Dashini, but she hasn't had a lot of chance to like shine. Because she wasn't really built into the story initially. And we've been slowly trying to make sure that she gets built into the story as our story opens up and she becomes more of a sort of core member of the cast. She finally has this beat She like comes to the rescue a little bit in Star Trek Arc 2 and Red Path, but here she has this really wonderful beat that kind of changes the way that the Scotty Spock subplot is going, because Scotty and Spock are kind of working together, but neither of them is used to being in command, and so they both keep deferring to one another. They're kind of working as like a partnership duo rather than as a starship crew. And at some point, Dashini, they're constantly like suggesting stuff back and forth, and Dashini just cuts off Spock in the middle of a suggestion and is like, no more suggestions. This is a fucking starship and we're fucking Starfleet. Now one of you old farts take the chair and start giving orders. And I fell in love with her. I was like, oh, she's my favorite character now. I get it. She's the person we need to just be like, shut the fuck up and do the work, which I love that kind of character. So I had a lot of fun with that beat. I thought that beat was really fun.
I really enjoyed when she was back up and she was going in, the earlier issue where she appears. I'm like, okay, this is a really great character, really original, and I like how she's taking charge, but the approach felt so different than many of the characters we've seen before in Star Trek history. So I've enjoyed the evolution of the character through the current issues. But yes, that was a great moment as well, with those old scientists that just happen to be around still. But I loved that. I also really enjoyed Lily and Rose interaction. I thought that was an interesting beat. And I mean, Lily has an earlier moment with Shax that we talked about briefly at Comic-Con, where it's just, she's trying to break in and do her thing. And Shax is just like, hurry up. It's like, and she puts him in his place. And that moment was one of my favorite beats, leading up to that. But even with Ro, she also has that moment of like, let me do my thing. And also, who are you to say what Starfleet is and isn't? Like, she calls her out. So I've enjoyed Lily's evolution as a character and the comfort of being able to stand her ground as well against these more established characters.
The cool thing about Lily, on top of the fact that like she's an original character who we got to bring to the table, but gets to connect our book to Enterprise and like has all these sort of like initial things that are really fun, and we've wanted to write an Andorian forever, so it's fun to finally write one. But the thing that's actually really exciting about Lily is where she's going. She has of all of our characters, I think she has the most challenging arc, really over the course of the books, because unlike any of the rest of our characters, except obviously Talir, and even there, Talir is boxed in more than people realize because they don't really know who Talir is yet. But I think what we're doing with Lily is one of the few things we get to call. Right. A lot of the other stuff in this book is about, like, for that Ro beat specifically, right? That Ro beat is a setup for Picard 3. It's a setup for the next couple of years of Defiant's run of Ro, but everything that Defiant is doing becomes set up for Picard 3. And we knew that heading in. That was one of those great things about this book, was that Picard 3 got to be in our conversations. We got to know where that was going. The Data lore conversation, similarly, really impacted by how the Data lore conversation goes in Picard 3. So we were like, we knew that we were setting that up with Ro, but Lily has no such box. Nobody's mentioned a Lily Sato. No one knows where a Lily Sato is. She's a character that we can kill at a moment's notice if we want to. Not that we're going to.
You wouldn't dare.
We wouldn't dare. But no, we have something much more interesting than Death Plan for her. And I think that's what's cool, is that she provides us this really awesome opportunity to actually do something unexpected. And she gets to go in some really interesting spaces. And I think you start to see that open here. And then in the next arc of Star Trek, which we've now announced, which is called A Savage World of Glass and Bone, or just Glass and Bone if you don't want to say 100 words. That book is going to continue to challenge Lily and push her to better understand where her idealism and the realism of Starfleet collide. I've always thought that was a really interesting story, and one that they've rarely done, the like idealist who slowly understands the realism of Starfleet. In some ways, like Nog is the closest thing they've done to that in Star Trek. And so I think Harry Kim probably could have been see what we're doing in Glass and Bone. But I think what's exciting about Lily is the way that we are arcing her and where she's going. And she's been a big part of our conversations right now in our next arc following Glass and Bone, which is what we're working on now. So it's been she's one of those characters where if she's popping for you right now, I'm very excited, because she's just about to get more and more and more of the spotlight as the book goes on.
Yeah.
So the other big moment that I really appreciated, and please forgive me, I've only read these within the last 30 minutes prior to our interview, and trying to internalize everything. The switch of the essentially the crews being a little bit more intermixed as they escape from Kronos, as it were. Just definitely put pieces in place and did very interesting arrangements. As far as that outcome, I won't spoil the specifics of it, but I really appreciated, how those characters have come into interact with each other, and even Beverly and Sella's interaction with X, trying to get our favorite Klingon Chancellor out to go help us. Like there was a really nice build up to it, but I appreciated once they were off world how that played out, and even just those interconnected moments of them playing off each other, it felt really comfortable as well, which isn't a big surprise with how you describe breaking the story. And
you just get those moments that, like, obviously as soon as you say, some of these characters, you're just hungry for them to get together, right? And like there's not a lot of people who can talk to Montgomery Scott as a peer and a friend without that kind of legendary sheen over him, but Spock can. Right? Like these are two old friends. So getting these kind of like opportunities to bring them together in order to unveil and explore the relationships that have been dormant for so long is like an incredible privilege and incredible. Yeah.
But it's also really fun to find those relationships you like never would have expected. And which is sort of the like fun, weird zhuzh that gets Day of Blood going, as you just said, right? By the end there, we've sort of shuffled up all the crews. Suddenly like different people are on the Defiant than are on the Theseus, heading into our finale issue, and that's for good reason. You'll see how it functions out in the finale, which I can't wait for people to see part 5. Like if you've liked Day of Blood up through part 4, part 5, which is sort of the big finale kickoff last run on last issue of that run, is Angel Unzueta just murdered every page. It is truly a remarkable issue of comics, just from a purely like Star Trek art perspective. I can't wait for people to see what's going on. But everybody has something to do. Everybody, all of these arcs were pre-planned. Every moment here, again, was like highly planned in the room. And we didn't divert really anything. The only thing that got fundamentally adjusted between the room and the actual issues was Shax's Best Day. The one shot that got added with Ryan North and Derek Charm, which was a joke that we were making in the writer's room because we didn't have anything for Shax to do. And we were like, well, Shax should probably just be off like having his best day ever, just fighting. Every Klingon wants to fight today. That's all they want to do. So he just gets to fight all the Klingons. That's like, it's like his dream come true. It'll be a great
best day ever.
Yeah, best day ever. Shax's Best Day, coming to comic shops next month. But then lo and behold, it is coming to comic shops next month by two of the best comedy people in the game. Like absolutely insane to me that book exists. But it was actually really funny because Ryan turned in his script, and Ryan wasn't in the room for this, and Ryan didn't plot any of this, right? But Ryan came in, it was like, and here I dismounted into your books. And we looked at it, we were like, oh, great. So that beat we now have to fold into Theseus, and that bolt we now have to fold into Defiant. And then we gave Ryan back, and we're like, hey, Ryan, can you change this line so that it ties up? So that all 3 books, Defiant, Flagship, and Shax's Best Day, all connect around Defiant 4, basically, like around around Flagship 3 and part 3 and part 4.
Yeah.
And as part 3 and part 4 transition, and you have Shax's Best Day in the middle there, they're all reflective of exactly the same scene, which was something we were really excited to be able to do. Sometimes you get that and you're like, oh, here's the scene from several different perspectives. It's this way from a certain point of view. And it's like, no. There's one thing that happens, and it's in the tone of all 3 books. And it's like, that's just really, it's really gratifying to get to do that and get to work with such incredible writers to do so.
And I mean, and to her absolute credit, once again, Heather Antos giving us the leash to do this, right? Giving us the runway to do this, and then being crazy enough to be like, hey guys, surprise, I took your stupid joke and now Ryan North is going to be doing it. Like it's going to be a book. And we're like, that's bananas. Because very rarely is an editor willing to like make your dorkiest dreams a reality. But that's why Heather brought us on. Like she loves our dorky dreams and helps actualize them every day.
So the last big beat of issue 4, which I know it's more Chris's, but I'd love to expand on it. The battle of Cisco, Worf, Alexander, and Kayla's. Are you calling Kayla's the second, Kayla's 2, Kayla's the clone? Like, how are you referring to Kayla's when you guys are breaking?
Kayla, we just call him Kalis.
I just want to be respectful of his title. You know, I don't want to upset the Klingons, and you know,
he's Kalis.
Okay.
I mean, like, you know, like when we have to in outline, if we're ever referring to the OG Kalis as opposed to Kalis 2, we refer to him as Kalis 2, like with like the Roman numerals, because that's how he's referred to inside the Klingon Empire, like within the canon. He's you know, Kalis the second, effectively.
Okay.
But yeah, within the context of the book, we just call him Kalis.
Titles are everything. I just want to be respectful. So, so you know, there's a lot going on.
You bring great honor to us, Matt.
Thank you. Don't piss off Klingons. I learned that a long time ago. That's the story for another time. But anyway, so there's a lot happening here. Obviously, Cisco and Kayla's are having their confrontation, while Worf and Alexander are figuring out their family issues. You know, you have a nice
at Batleth point.
Yeah, you know, like you do. You have a nice detour with a letter, of course, of Alexander, you know, writing to his father, you know, should they encounter each other, but then also just a moment of Alexander being pulled back of, you know, can he be redeemed? Can he be saved? Is Worf able to be redeemed and saved? He's lost so many people along the way, and I appreciated the constant callbacks to the loss of Dax and that tragedy. But I think the setup was really interesting of how, despite them being on the spire, you know, they are still able to have these individual moments while fighting for their lives.
Yeah. I mean, look, so huge credit to Chris, because he was handed, I think in many ways, the hardest part of this story, which is how do you manage both of those fight scenes simultaneously and nail character inside of them? And obviously it was all beat out in the room. It's not like we, you know, but when you get Chris's particular like internal framework for Worf during that whole thing, I think it's just so revelatory. That's something we haven't done as much in Trek. We do on occasion take Cisco's perspective, but Defiant takes Worf's perspective a lot. And I think it's been really cool to get that interiority on him and really understand what's going on. But then to do that with, I mean, like an 8-page Batleth fight sequence I think it's the best Batleth fight in Star Trek comics. I think, you know, and I say this as the guy, you know, we wrote Three Turn Bridge in Star Trek Klingons. I'd like to say that that's the best Batleth fight in Star Trek history, but I'm pretty sure this is it.
If I was in my other room, I would grab my Batleth and I'd start waving it around. I mean, Batleths, I think we can all agree, are the absolute coolest weapon in any science fiction ever. I mean, I'm sorry, laser swords, but Batleths are incredible. Yeah. And also in the art, you can I mean, look, I can gush about Klingon martial arts for a long time. Well, just like you, that's going to be a different conversation. But I think the really key thing here, and this is why only Chris could write this. I mean, we could have written a version of it, but neither of us are fathers, right? And Chris is a dad. His sons are incredible. But I think it brings that, you know, you got to write what you know in a lot of ways, and we can do our best guesstimation. We have had fathers, and we've written about that quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Kang the Conqueror. Read Kang the Conqueror. You want to know about our dads? Read Kang.
But for Chris to bring that kind of personal perspective, and then to put him through the ringer of like what happens to Alexander, and having Chris have to write that was a particularly unique kind of cruelty on our part. But because of that, it becomes this incredibly authentic, real beat. And you can feel the character's pain and feel the tragedy in it. And I think only Chris could have done that.
And it's wonderful. I mean, just, it is so incredibly impactful, but also just intense. I was waiting for it. Like, I knew something was going to happen, but, you know, obviously there's so many different directions that could go in. But even just the setup of, you know, Cisco's no, you know, exclamation was, you know, an indicator that there's more to come. So is the final installment your chapter then, or was it another group? Okay.
Yes, the final installment is Collin and I and Star Trek 12. So that'll be the wrap up. There's no like Omega issue. and it brings the whole thing to a head. It was quite the beat to follow up, but I think you'll see like how it's all coming together. I'm really like, again, I guess this is going to come out after it's happened, so I'll go ahead and like spoil it, right? So, but like spoiler warnings, if you haven't read it, fucking go read part 4 of Day of Blood before you listen to what I'm about to say. It's another aspect of this thing where the canon boxes us into certain things. There's certain stuff we just cannot do because of the canon and because we're trying to keep this book fundamentally canonical, right? Like we're eventually going to get overwritten. It always happens. That's your canon until you're not. But right now we're in this really lovely position where, because we are in with the teams on all the television shows, we're not being overwritten. We're being supported and we're being laced in. So given that that's where we're at, we're really trying not to break the canon. And then you come to that moment and you're like, well, Alexander has to die. He has to die. The story requires it. Worf requires it. Kahless and the sort of villain that he has become and the desperation that he is starting to exhibit requires that he take these really drastic actions. And we have to know, because that's really the theme with Kahless, right? That Day of Blood at its core is a meditation on fascist insurrection and how it is that you come into periods of violent fascism very rapidly and without a lot of understanding, because the followers of it stay quiet and then all of a sudden they unmask and they all do their thing, which is how this happens. It's how it's happened for hundreds of years, and it's how it just happened on January 6th, right? Like it happens over and over and over and over again. This book isn't about January 6th. It's about a common human thing. But in almost all of those cases, if you look at the head of that organization, you look at the person who's at the very, very top of those fascist populist movements, they wouldn't die for their followers. They would much rather their followers die for them. They will take their followers' lives for their own good, but they will rarely, if ever, put their bodies at the front of the line. And so it felt like that was a real moment to be like, if you had any question about whether or not Kahless is the kind of person who will stand in front of the army or behind the army, that's the one that answers it. Kahless 1 might have fought at the front of the army. Kahless 2 fights from the back, and he is a coward. There is a deep coward streak in this character that showcases itself when he kills Alexander, because he sort of needs a win, even though there's no win for him left. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a logical choice. It's a fully emotional choice. He's this kid let him down, so he kills him. That's it. He just wants to feel better because he's in a bad scenario. And that's like such a villainous moment. It's such a moment of clarity for Worf, for the audience, certainly for Sisko, heading into the last chapter so that we know who Kahless is heading into these final decisions. And we were like, well, okay, I mean, the actor who played Alexander is still alive. Like, all these actors are getting a shot at coming back to these characters. And I know that Terry Matalas would like love to use this character. He's been public about it. Like, but we're going to write him off the board here because it's what needs to happen. And we were sure Star Trek would stop us. And instead, Star Trek was fully willing to sort of back the play. And you'll see where that goes. But I think it's for me, it was a beat that really needed to land for Worf, and obviously Chris just pulled it off as well as could be, as could be pulled off, I think.
But yeah, everyone should strap in for the final art or for the final issue because it's all coming to a head. The blood will flow, the flames will burn, and the fate of the Klingon Empire will never be the same.
No big deal.
I mean, where do you go from there? So you said the next chapter is titled Shadow and Bone. I apologize.
No. It's called A Savage World of Glass and Bone, or just Glass and Bone, as they're putting it on the titles, because that thing has a lot of words in it.
Star Trek titles are well known to not be afraid of being a full mouthful, but I understand publishing restrictions. Whatever, guys.
Okay, so Glass and Bone, next arc. You just name dropped Mr. Harry Kim. Is there anything that you are allowed to share at this time, knowing that this is coming later?
Well, so we've announced certain things about it, and we're going to be generally cagey because we want to be the status quo of the book is a little bit different following Day of Blood, and so we have to be a little cagey about what's going on a wider scale. But what you can tell from the covers, which you can find if you just like look up the covers for Star Trek 13, a lot of them are out. There's a few things. First off, Marcus Toe is joining the book. Brilliant artist who started our careers with us on Hacktivist and Joyride at Boom. Joyride, which was our like punk rock teenage Star Trek, because we thought they would never let us write Star Trek. And Marcus is a huge Star Trek nerd. He loves Star Trek deeply. His wedding was Star Trek themed. He and I and Collin have been talking about doing Star Trek for years, and we've been trying to lure him away from Marvel so that he would come do this book with us. And lo and behold, Heather finally made it happen. So he's joining us for an entire arc. He's going to draw every issue of Glass and Bone. So get psyched for that. That's going to be a hell of a thing.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Have we announced where we're going with it? Can we share that?
do. Yes, it's in the solicit.
So just like fans might have followed us in when we did Star Trek Year 5 and how we essayed the Tholians, which were traditionally a race that really couldn't be shown on TV. The technology just wasn't there. There's another corner of the Star Trekiverse that has once again never really been explored because
outside of Star Trek Online.
Yeah, except outside of Star Trek Online. Once again, just budgetarily restrictive. But guess what, baby? Comics don't have that same restriction. So this arc, we are going to the planet of Zenketh. And we are finally going to start exploring and essaying the Zenkethi and their culture. And spoiler alert, they are space dinosaurs.
The Zenkethi are a species that are mentioned a bunch in Deep Space Nine. They go back in Sisko's time. They've had 2 wars with the Federation, both of which the Federation has like negligibly lost. They're set up as being basically like a small conglomeration of planets, mostly around one planet, Zenketh, that's near the Cardassian border. And the only other thing we know about them is that their creator, Robert Hewitt Wolf, obviously one of our heroes and who I got to meet recently on the strike line, and it was just a true honor. Robert always wanted the idea, if they ever saw the Zenkethi, to be that they were a species that had evolved from dinosaurs. And we thought, what an interesting challenge to take in the comics, where we're not limited by size and scale and scope and budget and all the other things that you can do. And you really have to differentiate them from the Gorn, a species who obviously people, when they think about space lizards in Star Trek, they think of the Gorn. So how do we do something that's just fundamentally different than that and really, really push in a different direction? So that is what we've been doing. We have sort of our take on the Zenkethi. That was initially actually built out, as some people know, a lot of these ideas had started in a decade-old Star Trek role-playing game that Collin and I used to play like back in the day when we were young kids, and every once in a while we mine a good idea from that and bring it forward. The Red Path is one such idea. Yaor and Zero from Arc 2 are another such idea. And the Zenkethi and their a lot of their culture and vibe is another such idea developed by a friend of ours named Dan Johnson, who is a creator of a show called Dimension 404 on Hulu, and who is an enormous dinosaur nerd, just the biggest dinosaur nerd that you've ever met in your life, in the most charming way. Like, I know so much about dinosaurs because Dan is my friend. I deeply love it, and we really love him. So it was a great chance to be like, hey, Dan's got this wealth of knowledge and this wealth of research that he's already put into this species through all of this time. Let's take some of that stuff and work to build it into this. And so that's what we've done.
As a seed to be inspired by and kind of unpack. But I think people are going to be, they're going to see a whole new side of our crew. They're going to be seeing a whole new kind of side of the Federation. You don't get to see a lot of, I mean, outside of some incredible episodes of Deep Space Nine, you don't see a lot of on the ground violence in Trek. You know, that's not necessarily something that is really explored, but this is going to get down and dirty in a lot of great ways.
And I think we've and a very unique new position for Mr. Harry Kim, and a very emotional storyline for Tom Paris, a character who up until now hasn't really had the spotlight in Flagship, and we felt like it was really time to give Tom Paris his arc. So for anybody who feels the same way about Tom and B'Elanna that Collin does, you will find quite a lot to love, I think, in Glass and Bone as we get into that arc.
Yeah. If you, like me, based too much of your personality on Tom Paris, notorious space Flyboy, you're in for a real treat. We're growing this boy. We're helping him. We're helping him grow into the man that he always should have been.
Guys, thank you so much for doing this deep dive in Day of Blood. It's been great. It's one of those unique opportunities to actually talk about it before it comes out, but also, just to explore this corner of the Trek universe. You guys continue to do stellar things, and congratulations to you and the team in advance.
No, thank you so much.
We've got more interviews coming up. We hope you enjoyed your time at FanExpo Chicago. If you joined us there, stay tuned for more interviews at Comics Online.